friends, Krista here. Thanks for stopping by Books and Jams. Today I'm going to be wrapping up the second half of the month of July. I did already do a video that I talk about the first half of the month and what I read during that. And I think there were 7 books that I read, which is crazy because I was gone in Turkey until July 11th. So yeah, I've done a lot of reading this month because I have 9 more books to talk to you about now. 9 plus 7, that's 16 books that I read this month. Crazy. That's crazy. So let me just jump into what I read during the second half of the month. There were 2 readathons that I participated in. One of them was the 24 in 48. And then right immediately following that was the reading rush. So I do have a vlog where I talked about a number of these books on that vlog as well. But I'm going to tell you a little bit more about them here. So if you missed me talking about them there, you're still going to get it here. I did read Crazy Rich Asians at the beginning of the month while I was on my trip. That's the only book I brought with me. And I did finish that trilogy in the second half of the month. I read China Rich Girlfriend, which is book 2 by Kevin Kwan. I read this during the 24 and 48. I read this in one day, actually, which was a pretty hefty feat. And I really enjoyed it. I liked the first one very much. We follow Nick and Rachel. His girlfriend, Nick, is from a very wealthy family in Singapore, and there are a lot of expectations and family expectations, parental expectations about who he's going to marry and how that should go. And in book 1, we find the obstacles that he comes across when he brings Rachel home to visit and meet his family and friends. This book carries on a little bit with Nick and Rachel's story, but we really go off into a lot of the other characters that we meet, some of Nick's cousins and others that we meet. It is still very filled with this, I don't even know how to describe it. Lots and lots of money, like obscenely rich, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on fashion and jewelry. And there's a lot of focus on that in both of these. And honestly, while I still enjoyed this one, I think the first one was my favorite. However, I didn't like how it ended without the closure that I wanted. This one brings us closer to that closure, but it does start to focus on more characters. I really liked some of the characters and I really didn't like some of the other characters. And this one was even more of that. We have less of Nick and Rachel, more of everybody else, more of a few that I really didn't like. And because I set this down for Reading Rush and then picked it up right at the end of the month, I had lost interest completely. So by the end of this, I was totally skimming through the chapters of the people I didn't care about and really just focusing on Nick and Rachel and Astrid, his cousin, who I loved throughout the series. It was still a lot of fun, but I was like, please don't tell me about another massively expensive dress by this designer that I don't know or care about. I just didn't care about all of the spending of money. When things are super tight for me financially, it was kind of frustrating to read about such waste. And whatever, I get it. If you have the money, spend it, do your thing. But there are also so many other different ways to spend money. Anyways, that was just a little needle, like a little, I don't know, something that I just didn't care about with this one. But I did enjoy the series. Overall, I think the highest rating was 3. I think I gave the first 2 3 stars. Maybe I gave the first one 4. This one I gave China Rich Girlfriend 3, and then by this one I only gave it 2 stars. I definitely am still interested in seeing the movie, but I'm just feeling kind of meh about the books right now. Also, during 24 and 48, I listened to the audiobook of Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore by Robin Sloan, which was so much fun. I think because I was getting sleepy in the car, I was listening to this while I drove to an author event in DC and back, which is about just under a 2-hour drive. So I was getting a little sleepy on the way back, and so I may have missed some stuff or zoned out a little bit, which is not so good in the car. But I really enjoyed this. I think I gave it 4 stars. We follow Clay, who's a young man, lost his job in the recession, ends up working at this bookstore, and this bookstore turns out to be more than what it seems. It kind of had a, I don't know, National Treasure, Da Vinci Code type of a vibe where there's like a secret society almost, and almost a treasure hunt to follow. It was very fun. And not what I was expecting. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but it wasn't what I got. I really enjoyed this. It was very quick. I think the audiobook is less than 6 hours, or about 6 hours. So it's a super short read. I'm glad that I read it. This is one that was recommended to me at the beginning of the year, so I knocked another one of those off of that list, which was a lot of fun as well. Enjoyed that. The next 4 that I have are the ones that I read for the reading rush. So I'm not going to talk too long about these, but I did read another Ella Montgomery book. I read Jane of Lantern Hill, where we follow a 10 and 11-year-old girl named Jane who lives with her mother and grandmother and crotchety old aunt. And actually the grandmother is super cranky, super strict, very overbearing and overpowering, and her mother is a little bit of a pushover, doesn't stand up to grandma at all. But then one year, her father, who lives on Prince Edward Island, wrote to request for Jane to come and stay with him for the summer. She does go, and it changes her life forever. So we get all of the beautiful descriptions that that Ella Montgomery gives about Prince Edward Island in particular, but about the people as well. And it was just like coming home a little bit, because Anne is one of my favorite books and series and characters ever. And so coming home to Ella Montgomery is like cozy, comforting read. I gave this 4 stars, I believe, maybe 5. I can't remember now, but I just absolutely loved it. It was very sweet, and I definitely am planning on reading more and more from Ella Montgomery. Next, I read another middle grade, The Care and Feeding of a Pet Black Hole by Michelle Cuevas. In this one, we follow Stella, who is a young girl who is very into science and outer space astronomy stuff especially. And that was a big connection that she had with her father, who passed away. So this book is Stella writing as if she's writing to her father. It's not diary format or anything like that, but we do hear her talking as if she's talking to her father and kind of dealing with having lost him and what does that mean. We start out with her leaving NASA, where she tried to go and have a recording of her dad's laugh be included in this like grand recording that they were going to send out to space with all of these important sounds from Earth. And she wanted her dad's laugh to be included because he had just a fabulous laugh. Well, when she leaves NASA, she is followed home by this black hole. And this black hole kind of becomes a pet to her. She teaches it to stay and sit because she quickly realizes that anything this black hole touches gets absorbed into it. But then she starts to realize that this could be a little bit fun, and she throws in a few things that annoy her, like one of the toys that her brother always plays with in the bathtub, and things that make her sad, like the science projects that she worked on with her father. But then she sees how life changes because of the things that she's thrown into the hole, and eventually even more and more gets into the hole. Even her brother, their pet dog, the bathtub, so she goes in to rescue them. So this is a very obvious metaphor. The black hole is her grief, but it was very cute. It was quirky. There was humor. It was sweet. And I love books that help young people process grief, because that's really what this book was. Stella processing what life was going to be like now without her father and how she could handle or not handle that sadness. It was very sweet. I thought it would have me sobbing. It didn't. So it didn't get as emotional as I thought it would, but maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. I really loved this book and would definitely recommend it. I read Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe by Fanny Flagg. I really enjoyed this book. Fried Green Tomatoes was one of my favorite movies for a long time. I've seen it many, many times, and I did rewatch it after the reading rush, so I technically didn't get that challenge, but I did watch it and loved the movie, loved the book. This is a book that deals a lot with race. We follow 2 different timelines. One of them is in the 1980s, where Evelyn goes to this nursing home to visit her husband's aunt and ends up meeting Ninny, who tells the story of the Whistle Stop Cafe and her time in Whistle Stop in the 1930s. But because it was written in the 1980s, some of the language that we use now, or that we used then, is not acceptable anymore. And so it was a little cringy every once in a while, but I still really enjoyed this story of the Threadgoods and Buddy and Idgie and Ruth and their cafe, and the way that this community banded together and loved each other, and the little bit of mystery that's in there and the humor interspersed between these two storylines are these almost like newsletter clips from this woman. I mean, Whistle Stop is a teeny tiny little train stop town, and there was this woman, what's her name? Dot Weems, who published this little newsletter just telling about events that happen around town and events that are coming up and what her husband is up to. And it was full of life and humor and hard situations as well, and love, a lot of love. And it was a really great read. I loved it. And this is also one that was recommended to me at the beginning of the year, so I'm glad that I read that one as well. The final book that I read for Reading Rush is Maisie Jobs by Jacqueline Winspear, the third book that I read this month that was recommended to me. So I'm very excited to get another one knocked off that list. Third or fourth? Third, I think. This is a mystery set in the 1920s. It's the beginning of a quite expansive series, I believe. So it's a historical mystery. We follow Maisie, who is a young woman kind of starting out on her own. At the very beginning, she's purchasing a little room to use as her office, or renting out a room. She actually knows the caretaker of this building because he was a soldier in World War I, where she was a nurse. So we kind of get some flashbacks to what that was like in the wartime and like during the war for her as a nurse. And the story that we follow in here has a lot to do with the war. There's a man who has set up this kind of exclusive retreat for soldiers who have experienced either just a lot of trauma or some facial disfigurements or other bodily disfigurements because of the war. So he sets up this retreat for them, but then there are some shady things going on, and one of Maisie's mentors is an older woman whose son is thinking about going to this retreat, and so Maisie is instrumental in figuring out what's going on. It was pretty much what I expected in a historical mystery. We're getting some historical elements because of World War II and nursing and doctoring and the soldiers experiencing that. We also talk a lot about, there's a lot about PTSD in here and what life is like after war for soldiers, which is still a subject that needs to be talked about even more because we don't do enough for our veterans, in my opinion. But yeah, I think this was it was a good balance between these heavy topics and also kind of lighthearted, and it flowed really quickly, and I really loved it, and I'm definitely interested in reading more from this series. I don't have book 2 or 3 or anything, so I'll have to keep an eye out for those, but I definitely am interested in continuing this series, and I thought it was a really great read. I did have 2 more audiobooks this month. I listened to American Street by E.B. Zoboi, which is a YA that deals with a Haitian girl who immigrates to the United States with her mom. Her mom, however, is held up in a detention center for illegal immigrants, where she is able to, but the girl is able to move in with her cousins. So she moves in with her cousins, starts to learn what life is like. They live on American Street for not only blacks in America, but for other nationality, for a Haitian to live in America. Friendships and relationships, but it's in an inner city, very urban, lower income area. There's a lot of drug references in here, and it ended on a note that I was not expecting whatsoever. It was a book that was recommended to me by a librarian, so I'm not going to talk more about it here, but I did listen to that one this month. And then I ended up the month listening to The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I've seen this book everywhere. I have heard everyone talking about it. I used Libro FM to download this book and listen to it, and it was just so much fun. Classic hate to love. These 2 people are getting married, but at the wedding reception, everybody gets sick except for the maid of honor and the best man, who are siblings to the bride and groom. They did not eat from the buffet for different reasons, and they're the only ones who do not get sick from this wedding. And so the bride and groom tell them they need to be the ones to take the honeymoon because it's non-refundable. They can't change the dates, yada, yada. So these two, who actually do not have a very friendly relationship, the maid of honor actually hates the best man and doesn't like him at all, can't stand him, thinks that he feels the same way about her. There's a lot of banter and just rudeness to each other, but then they're forced to be together at this resort and participate in all of these activities and try to get the most for their money because it's all paid for already. What I enjoyed about this is that there's a lot of sexual tension and very little sex. I think we have one scene that starts to get into detail, but then it kind of stops and we wake up the next morning. So I appreciate that it wasn't super, super steamy, but you still get all those like butterflies and ooh, like there's a lot of sexual tension and I loved it. It was just a lot of fun to read. Perfect summertime read. I just really enjoyed it. So good job, Christina Lauren. And that is it for my July books. Like I said, I had 7 that I talked about at the beginning of the month and then 9 more at the end of the month. So here are the 7 that I have here. Some need to go back to the library really soon. I would love to hear from you. What was one of your favorite reads from the month of July or anything else that you want to chat about? I love talking with you down in the comments, so let's talk down there. Give this video a big thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will be talking to you in another video very soon. Bye!